Now that the context, tone, and tenor is set for the day, we're all set to flag off as we come to an important session on India's Techade, Aspirations and Actions. For this chat, I would once again like to invite Debjani to take the discussion on with the Honorable Minister of State for Skill Development and Entrepreneurship and Minister of State for Electronics and Information Technology, Government of India, Shri Rajeev Chandrasekhar. They will delve on the year that went by, the digital landmarks and vision at 100 for the tech industry. Over to you, Debjani.
So exactly a year back, we had the Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji delivering the inaugural address at the NASSCOM Leadership Forum keynote, laying down the vision of the Techade. The word was very new at that point. A lot of people were wondering, what is this about? And he talked about what the Techade meant and the opportunity ahead of India to make this India's Techade. And I'm delighted that today we have the man leading the charge from the front with us to take the conversation forward. Mr. Chandrasekhar needs no introduction, Minister of State for Skill Development and Entrepreneurship and Electronics and IT for India. A very strategic combination of roles, if you ask me, very interesting portfolio that sets him up perfectly to lead the charge of realizing our ambition of becoming $1 trillion digital economy and some more. So, Minister, thank you very much for taking the time to do the honors today of inaugurating the NASSCOM Tech and Leadership Forum. You will know we just announced the results for FY 2022, and what a fabulous year it has been for the industry. Crossed the 200 billion mark, 30 billion revenue added in a year, highest ever hiring that we have ever seen in the industry with 4.5 lakh new hires, 36% diversity. I mean, it was just fabulous to see such healthy and all-round growth across the industry. And I think the results that we have seen really sets us up for making this India's Techade as the challenge that the Prime Minister had thrown to us. So what I want to start with is, let's fast forward to 2030 when we are nearing the end of the decade. What will success look like to you? What would you want us to have achieved by then?
No, so thank you, Debjani, for having me today, and thank you for doing this. That the last 1 year has been an absolutely spectacular year for India as a country. We have demonstrated in so many different ways to the world what we are truly capable of. We've done that on the vaccination front, we've done that on the economy front, we've done that on the technology economy front, we've done that on the startups front, and we've done that FDI, agricultural exports, all of that. And I think, you talk about 2030, we are 75 years as an independent nation, and in 25 years from now, we would be celebrating 100 years of our independence, and then somewhere in between will be 2030. And I think we will look back in 2030 at this remarkable couple of years that really truly marked an inflection point in our journey as a nation. And for the tech sector in particular, and how our tech sector, and I believe this genuinely, I believe that India's tech sector and the tech entrepreneurs and tech entrepreneurship and innovation in general originating in India will really drive the next decade and a half of the progress, growth, transformation around the world. And I think for a number of years we have talked about the potential of India. And in 2030, I would like, to be sitting hopefully hale and healthy and along with all of you, and looking back at the journey of the 8 years or the 9 years, or even including the 10 years since the COVID, and say, wow, what a ride this has been. And I would like us to be clearly in the $500 billion, $600 billion range in terms of technology services. I would like us to be more than $1 trillion in digital economy. I would like us to be $300 billion of electronics, global electronics manufacturing, with $120 billion of exports. And I would like us to be driving the startup and innovation ecosystem in ways and directions that we even today don't really see in terms of its details. But that we are all set for that kind of, let us say, end point, assuming 2030 is a milestone in our journey, that kind of milestone, I have absolute confidence that we can do it, especially since taking as a basis what we have done in the last 2 years. Of course, we've had a longer period of being technology innovators in the past, but the last 2 years have given the world a sense of, and I say this with all, with great humility on behalf of all of us, but a sense of awe and respect that people did not have in kind before. So, thanks to you and all of your colleagues and the many startups and the entrepreneurs around the country who have allowed this government to set these ambitions, our Prime Minister to set these goals, and you have stepped up and demonstrated that those goals are realizable.
Absolutely. And in fact, if there is one thing that we say, triggered this confidence, this growth, it's that one reform which the Prime Minister himself drove and made it happen against all odds, which was the OSP reform. Without that, I honestly believe that the story that we would be telling today would have been very, very different. So it's been fascinating to see the kind of reforms and therefore the confidence. And you talked about confidence in the industry. I'll tell you this: the energy, just the positive energy in the room is something I have not seen before in this industry. It's just truly unprecedented. Now, as we talk about technology and the role it's playing in our lives, it's pretty much getting weaved into every aspect of life. It's reaching the grassroots levels. And I do believe that India is doing a far better job than any other country out there in terms of taking technology down to the absolute grassroots, changing lives at the grassroots. Now, there's also a lot of concern as technology pretty much becomes an invisible element in your life. And our next guest, who's speaking right after you, Professor Yuval Harari, says that, we are becoming increasingly hackable. So is this something that you worry about too? And, if you were to set the design principles for India's technology framework, what would it be?
No, so first of all, let me just touch on that issue of technology impacting, real people and real lives. And I think this is one difference in the last 5 years in India, where, there's always been this narrative about technology having the power to be inclusive, and this has been around for a few decades. And India has actually become now the preeminent countries, and I say this in all my conversations with all the G20 digital ministers and all the counterparts around the world who also have the responsibility of stewarding technology in their countries, that we are really the one country that has demonstrated the use of technology in manners that is really transforming governance and democracy in real ways. And I think India can rightfully take a bow in saying that the inclusion or the inclusivity attribute and power of technology that has oft been spoken about, we are the living, breathing demonstrator that can be made to happen if there is political will and political leadership and vision. Having said that, it is clear from our Prime Minister's leadership that he wants technology to effectively be able, his primary objective is to take government and governance and public services and public subsidies and all of the other benefits that a citizen believes he or she is entitled to every citizen. And so that is the preeminent objective of the deployment of technology in government and digital government. And if that is the objective, and then we end up saying that $1.2 billion Indians are going to be online, in a sense, connecting with the government, connecting with these services, connecting with public services and other utilities, then it becomes very clear to me that this aspect of safety and trust of citizenship online, the aspect of safety, trust, accountability, and openness, all of these seem very, very different, contradictory principles and attributes. But they are effectively a proposition, almost like a digital Magna Carta of what our citizens require and will need. And it is, Debjani, that it is clear that the aspect of rights, the aspect of safety, and aspect of trust online has followed convenience. So connectivity, convenience, speed, responsiveness, all of those things drove the internet for several years and decades, and it is now that the discourse is moving around to the other issues and equally important issues of safety, trust, openness, and accountability. For us, it is an absolute article of faith that while we talk about technology, trusted technology, safe technology, ethical use of technology, the ability for consumers to have rights even though they are digital citizens, these are all very, very important attributes for us to deliver public policy on, to administrative action, regulatory capacity, and or laws and jurisprudence. So I will just say it as, while digitizing our democracy is important, keeping our democracy safe and ensuring technology is deployed in a trusted manner and an accountable manner is equally important.
It's very interesting. You mentioned the word trust, and I do believe that trust is the most important currency of the digital era. It's a decision. It's what makes people decide whether they want to work with a country, they want to invest in a country, or even work with a company. And I do believe that in order to build strengthen the India trust quotient, some of the policies, whether it's data protection or cybersecurity act, have to come into play and have to come into play very soon. I mean, these will never be perfect, I guess, but as long as there's healthy debate, there's healthy discussion, it works. So any thoughts on, when are we going to see the Data Protection Act actually become live?
No, look, this discourse around the privacy, data protection is a discourse that is some years old. As a member of parliament, I was one of the few that actually approached the Supreme Court on this issue. We have a draft legislation that then went to parliament, and now the parliament has given it back to government with their comments on it. But the origins of that bill are about the provenance of that bill are about 3 years old. Yeah. And a significant amount of changes have happened since that. So there is a natural number of people who are commenting on and writing to me, talking to me about whether the bill needs to be further improved, further discussed, whether the bill meets the full spectrum of the need to be evolvable and flexible given the changes in the future. So that discussion is on, Debjani. My own view on this is, and I say this and I've said this in the past, that it is important to get the next bit of legislation very right. And I don't mean very right in terms of the details of the right as much as the ability for it to be flexible and evolutionary. I think we would be making a big mistake if we move into legislation that is very hard-coded, very embedded in terms of principles that may not be necessarily evolvable and are very, let us say, current. And so for all of those reasons, I think the fact that we need a new digital law because our current legislation is 20 years old, the IT Act, that we need more of a law for the internet, and that we have this data protection law that addresses the issues of the citizens' right to privacy and lays out the rules for all of the intermediaries. But the flip side of that is we want to make sure that the momentum of our startup ecosystem, is not blunted by even 1% if the regime hints at higher degree of compliance costs and higher degree of compliance bureaucracy. So these are all issues that, frankly, the Prime Minister has always said in these areas we must have as much public consultation as possible. And we are talking to people. The bill has been referred back to the ministry, as you know, and I have been flooded with letters from all kinds of industry associations, critical of it, supporting it, and so on and so forth. So we will continue this conversation for a little bit longer, in my opinion, because I would not want to just rush into something and have to, in a sense, then go back with more amendments and correct things and so on and so forth. You are absolutely right. The world needs to get a signal that the Indian cyberspace is safe, trusted, it's open, it's accountable, and most importantly, it's very predictable in terms of what the jurisprudence around it is. And I think that is our mission and that is our goal, and we'll work at it.
That's very reassuring. We'll switch tracks a bit to talk about talent, which is also another big charter that you hold. The Prime Minister rightly said that in coming years, India will be the biggest supplier of workforce to the world. I completely agree with that. In fact, in the report that we just launched for FY22, it was interesting to see that of the 5 million workforce that the tech industry employs, nearly around 1.6 million are digitally skilled. That means 1 out of 3 are digitally skilled, and the number is just growing every day. It was also interesting to see that given that globally there's a gap between demand and supply in digital talent, India actually has the shortest or has the lowest score of 21.1% gap between demand and supply, whereas countries like US, UK, are in the high 27 to 30%, China is around 25%, etc. So we actually have a huge advantage there. But today, the needs are changing, especially for our industry. What we are seeing is companies are hiring more for the way you think, how fast you can learn, and the skills can be taught. It's more for your attitude than your aptitude. And your aptitudes is what we are training them on. So, question to you, Minister, is what's your thought on how we can change the core education system, to focus on growing this, the culture of or the generation of learners, curiosity, people who collaborate, people who ask questions, sort of. How do we instill the curiosity and love for learning versus just imparting knowledge? Is that a goal, and how do we enable it?
No, I think it's a very good question, and it is a very relevant question, more relevant even now, even so in the post-COVID era that we are living in, where there is a demand for newer and newer skills, there is a demand for more and more digital skills, and there is a demand for more and more people to skill themselves digitally. So there is a completely, in my opinion, a new paradigm to learning that is evolving in post-COVID, during COVID and post-COVID, and there is a new paradigm of what people want to learn. So both these things are happening almost simultaneously. Look, as far as if you just step back a minute and look at where India is today on the education, learning and skilling space, we have now in 2020, so let me give you a little backstory. In the 5 years since the Prime Minister launched the Skill India mission, I don't know if you're aware, but this is a good number for your audience to know. The government skilling program, skilling alone, not education by the way, has skilled over 50 million Indians, 5 crore Indians. And of course, these are all primarily blue collar, with some small percentage in the white collar space and in the tech space. But I'm putting the number out there not to show you the efficacy of our skilling system, but to show you the numbers that are in the skilling network at any given time. Now, fast forward to 2020, the government has created, in my opinion, or enacted the biggest reform in education since independence, which is the new education policy, which in a sense converges vocational training and education, the conventional education, into a triple runway model for children, where they can choose higher education when they get out of school, they can choose skilling and vocations when they get out of school, and or they can choose sports. And all three are essentially independent career tracks that are available to them, that they can start thinking about, pondering about, experiencing whilst in school. So it is not that you end up in 12th standard and suddenly are left with either an option of dropping out of school or going into a bachelor's program in where you get admission. So I think there is that fundamental reform that has happened. The second thing is, on the 15th of July, about 8 days after I was given this responsibility, the Prime Minister tasked us with reimagining skilling in this new post-COVID world. So we are doing a lot of things in skilling that go to the heart of your question, which is, how do we take those who are skilled who need to be reskilled? How do we take people who are skilled who need to be upskilled? And how do we take people who have absolutely no skill and make them skilled? And this could be a graduate becoming a getting into the tech workforce. It could be a tech workforce who is going up the value chain and learning AI and other forms of work. And it could be somebody who's completely outside the system, who has never been in the tech space and wants to be part of the digital space, and gets in there through a series of skillings and programming and coding, and then getting into the workforce. One thing is sure, the appetite amongst the young Indian today, whether he is in Lucknow, he is in Kohima, he or she is in Srinagar, or in Bengaluru or Pune or Hubli or Dharwad, the appetite for all our young Indians to get on this education, skilling, micro entrepreneurship, workforce sort of a runway is tremendous. And I think, if anything, I'm excited by this responsibility and excited by what we are doing, but sometimes always overawed by the sense of expectation and the audience that we are addressing, because India is such a huge country, and one of the things that the Prime Minister has done is, in a sense, unlock and unleash ambitions and aspirations in every Indian across India. And so that can be a little awe-inspiring sometimes, and breathtaking in terms of, I just finished a program today, which was a political program and a party program, and almost all the questions that I had to take were to do with skilling. And so, and I think that there's a lot of good in that people are aware of that. They are very aspirational, but it puts a lot of pressure on us to deliver exactly what they want. And we are working with Future Skills Prime, with people such as yourself, on the higher end of the skill matrix, on how to address the white collar demands of the world. And I was recently in Dubai, and I was at a breakfast meeting with a large number of traditional labor, labor companies or workforce outsourcing companies. And they were all now interested in rejigging and reimagining their engagement with India from being purely blue collar to now blue collar and white collar, because every economy is digitizing, businesses as far away as Africa are digitizing, and they all want white collar capabilities as much as they want blue collar capabilities. So I think it's a great opportunity for India, and we are very engaged on it, and I hope we will deliver.
Oh, I mean, it's such a brilliant problem to have, right? I mean, 200 billion industry growing, or will continue to grow double digits over the next few years. Imagine the possibilities, and still has a talent crisis.
Absolutely.
Still needs more people.
Absolutely.
And India has such a large population of youngsters joining the workforce. I mean, it's a brilliant problem to have.
Absolutely.
Switching gears a little bit, you talked a bit about regulatory policies, and you talked about the need for enabling regulatory framework, which I completely agree with. As the world is trying to think about, I mean, every country is trying to think about how to regulate, how much to regulate, especially when it comes to big tech, etc. Do you think there's an opportunity here for global collaboration to figure out regulatory frameworks? And should India be taking the lead in some of these discussions? And also, how would you balance sort of national interest versus broader industry interest when you take things like cross-border data flow, etc.? How do you figure out where to balance it? How?
No, yeah, so on the first part of your question, Debjani, I think it is absolutely important and imperative, and I'll make this very clear, and I've said this many times before I joined government as well, that it is, if we are to bring some sort of sanity and some consistency in the way big tech and these technology platforms are more accountable to the communities and societies they serve, countries will have to cooperate. There's just absolutely, in my mind, there's no ambiguity in my mind at all. Now, the cooperation can range from cyber crime, cyber security type of cross-border cooperation, to broader to cooperation on the other hand, or in terms of protocols and frameworks of regulatory principles that countries, especially democracies and open societies, can agree to share. Because it should not be that India does something, then that is spun as being anti-free speech, and then some other countries then find it difficult to do, because at the end of the day, all democracies have their fair share of politics, and often this attempt to regulation, or attempt even to create some sort of sanity and rules and accountability, is spun as a challenge to free speech. So I will just say that is necessary. It requires more global cooperation and dialogue, and there is no such thing as being an island of safety and harmony and tranquility on the cyberspace. I mean, that just does not exist by the very nature of the internet, as much as you fool yourself into believing that is possible. So that is that. Should India take the lead? I think India should take the lead. India must take the lead. We are the largest connected market in the world, and even if you want to include China, which is really not the internet, it is something else, we will still be one of the largest markets and clearly one of the largest connected democracies in the world. And we have a lot to teach the world in terms of how do we manage digitization, how do we manage to increase digital adoption, how do we manage inclusion and access to all, but at the same time ensure that the internet is safe and trusted and open and accountable. And we have done that. We were the first countries to come up with the IT rules. As you've seen, other countries have followed suit. Canada has done that. Some other countries are doing the same. And I think that is an area of leadership that we should confidently take. And I think, and the idea that in some sense that everything on the internet we need to just wait and watch and follow somebody else, I think went out of fashion some years ago. Clearly after 2014, that's not the case. And I suspect that we have to, and we will. And I think if you see down the road what we are proposing with the new digital law, etc., you will see that we will set the we will set the bar in terms of what jurisprudence around the internet should be like. On the other question about cross-border and data flows and data sovereignty and all of that, I think different countries will have different levels of threshold on how they deal with cross-border data flows. I personally believe that in today, by the very nature of the cyberspace and the internet, to try and argue that there should be no cross-border data flows is to say I will be China, because then you have an intranet and you have these little taps that you turn on and off at the gateways of the internet. So we are an open society, we are an open democracy, our internet is plugged into the rest of the global cyberspace, and therefore by the very nature of the internet, data will flow back and forth between jurisdictions, between geographical and legal jurisdiction. However, we can create other safety measures to protect driven by the first principle of protecting the rights of Indian consumers, and that is a layer on that can be easily built on, as long as that is built on layers of principles that are bereft of rhetoric and bereft of all of this other stuff that gets distracting once in a while. But to protect the jurisdictional rights of our consumers is the duty of of any government, including ours. And if that requires some degree of managed data flows or rules for cross-border data flows, that is something that we should be very open to exploring and discussing and negotiating. But I am not a big believer in saying that we will restrict data flows and that we will not be part of the digital economy, global digital economy.
Wonderfully explained. Thank you. When we announced your session, we got a lot of questions from industry, especially students. So I'm going to take the next few minutes to just throw a few of these to you. One of the most asked questions by the student community was, do you code? And what is the new skill that you want to learn?
No, I mean, I've done my fair share of coding. I can assure people that I've done coding, intensive coding of the kind that I think I've seen youngsters code today, and they code with tremendous other tools and capabilities that we did not have at that point. We had to do assembly coding, and we were doing coding instruction wise. I enjoyed coding, and I thought I was reasonably good at it as well. And also I don't code anymore, but I do a different type of coding. I write my notes, I organize my thoughts, I do coding. Let's say I call it coding in the public domain, public policies. So that is also a kind of coding. I do that. In terms of skills, I would like to. I would definitely like to learn a lot more about machine learning and some of the things that I believe are going to be technologies of the future. And I'm not saying I'm going to necessarily embed myself or insert myself at the level of detail that I did when I was a full-time techie. But I would like to learn more, and I make it a habit to engage very regularly with very bright brains and very bright minds. And I think in public life, it is there's no stopping your learning process, and I like to continuously learn. And I learn from, like I said, I like to say this story all the time. I learned from this young 11th standard girl who from a UP government school who did a coding, AI coding piece, an app. I learned from her as much as I learned from Professor Kamakoti at IIT Chennai or any of the other senior academics that I regularly interact with. Yeah, learning is, and by the way, I think to survive and to be relevant in the tech space, if you don't learn, you're dead and you're an has-been.
Absolutely, amen to that. My last question to you, Professor Harari says that history plays a key role in shaping the future. So if we could give you a time machine and send you back in time to meet with the 16-year-old Rajeev Chandrasekhar, what would you tell him, or what would you change about what's going to happen so that the history might look different for you today?
No, Debjani, I know this may sound a bit cliched, but I wouldn't change a thing. I've been very fortunate to have had tremendous number of opportunities that I never ever thought that I would have. I never thought I would go to the US, and I never thought I would be a computer science techie, or I never thought I would end up serving Kentucky Fried Chicken in the south side of Chicago. I never, everything that has happened to me, I never thought I'd be a mobile entrepreneur in India and be amongst the first to set up a mobile network in the country. I never thought I would be in public life and be a member of parliament. I never thought I'd be a minister. So these things have happened to me, and I think it's part blessing, part hard work, and I wouldn't change a thing. Obviously, I would try and keep myself healthier, and I would have been leaner and put on less weight, and I would have focused on my health a little bit more. But these things are all hypothetical. I mean, sometimes you just have to go with what you are dealt with, and I have no regrets, and I'm deeply grateful for every opportunity that I've got, and I try to make the best of every opportunity that I get.
A wonderful answer. So, with that, Minister, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
taking the time to be here today. The kind of energy you have brought into the sector, you've brought into the industry, is just so wonderful to see. You've created this, this environment of collaboration of Team India, where everybody has a role to play, and it's fantastic. And we're just so open to ideas, to discussions. Thank you very much. And do stay healthy for our sake. So thank you very much.
Thank
Take
you.
care of
Thank
yourself.
you. Thank you for your time, and thank you for patiently hearing me out. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that was an absolutely fascinating conversation with Minister Rajeev Chandrasekhar. I mean, fantastic insights, and it just sets the tone for the conversation we are going to have over the next 3 days.